everybody. Welcome to Drink of Thrones, the show where we discuss everything Thrones.
And of course, we drink while doing it.
I'm Louie,
And I'm Jazmin.
and welcome to the show. First and foremost, don't forget to like and subscribe. And obviously, if you want to leave a comment, we welcome those as well. Today's show, we're going to discuss the upcoming, hopefully, sequel for Game of Thrones, the Jon Snow sequel, right?
Yeah, so we're gonna go ahead and be discussing possible what we know up until now, and possible predictions for the up and coming Jon Snow sequel.
Yes. So we do know, it's been speculated at least, that the show would be called Snow. That we do know. We know that it's in early development. It still has not been greenlit by HBO or obviously the filming of it. But what do we expect from it?
Well, right now it's hard to say, right? Because we do also know that it could possibly be a limited or a continuous series. If it's a limited series, it seems more likely that it'll be kind of like the Dunk and Egg saga, where it's more of an adventure story. But if it's a continued season and it's gonna be like the Game of Thrones, like as a political drama, that's where it gets interesting, right?
Yes, because then obviously we have different key players involving, characters that we know and love. We have Arya, we have Bran still out there, we have Sansa, and those are just the main ones. Obviously, there's Brienne, Yara, and Grey Worm somewhere out there. We have just the possibilities are endless. But what do you think?
Well, I think if there was one thing that came out that was good about the season 8 is that they left a little bit of ambiguity on some characters, right? Predominantly Daenerys and Drogon.
Drogon's still alive. We know that. And not only that, Drogon took Daenerys' body, and we don't know where. We don't know. We definitely know that people can be revived. We know that. Yeah. And we know that typically it's by some sort of priest, and it's typically somebody that follows the Lord of Light. And Targaryens are definitely ones that follow the Lord of Light.
Yeah, but we also have I don't know if they follow the Lord of Light necessarily. It's a lot of Valyrians because they follow the Red God, right? There's a lot of red priests and priestesses. There's that type of religion. But then we also have the old gods. And we know that the three-eyed raven was kept alive for multiple years, on that end. We also have other people coming back like Don Dondarrion, who wasn't necessarily following the Lord of Light, but he grew faith with the Red Priest, right?
Yeah. I'm interested to know, I think the important part of a story like this is the conflict, right? It's not a secret. Now, Jon going north, this being a show about Jon Snow, who do we have left, or what kind of conflict is to be expected, right? We don't know what's up north. We had a very brief view of it with the free folk or wildlings, whatever you want to call them, and obviously the walkers. But what's out there?
Yeah, it was very much we're bringing the North to Westeros, right? To save Westeros and to save themselves, but it wasn't, we didn't really get introduced into too much. We didn't linger there, right? Like it was only Jon Snow hiding there and trying to convince them to leave, right?
Yeah. Yeah, we don't know what kind of story is going to be told. Is Jon going to be forced back south of the wall for some greater good or greater evil, however you want to say it, and be forced to reunite with his family or the people in Westeros to save them somehow? Or is this something that's strictly going to take place up north? And if we have new evil, or we have perhaps the walkers again, something, what's out there. And I think it could be done well if the writing is on point.
And now I think I agree with you, but I think like let's get into that possibility. If Daenerys is alive, let's grant that she's alive. It's going to be a continuation show, and everyone who has said that they'd be interested in coming back, which is Maisie Williams, so Arya, I believe, is it Sansa? Did they say she was going to come back?
Sophie Turner, Sophie Turner. I don't know.
I think she's a kind of a question mark, but I think she would need to come back. She would be an important part of the story.
She's the queen of the North.
Yeah, I mean,
it's the closest thing to Jon at this moment, as far as we know.
Yeah, so I mean, there you kind of have a potential villain for the future, because her and Daenerys didn't necessarily, see eye to eye.
Yeah.
And then you also have Grey Worm, who the actor said he was down to come back also. So there you have, yes, he left and he didn't necessarily leave happy with Jon. So there's that divide. But if Daenerys came back, he would rally again. He would rally behind her.
Yes. And like I said, there's a bunch of possibilities depending on who comes back. And I wonder if the storyline depends on people that are willing to sign on. Because if that's the case, the storyline could suffer. I think the storyline should be written. It should be well written. And then shown to people saying, hey, okay, I understand. And that, the people that want to come back. That's not going to be much of an issue. The issue is that if you need, let's say, Tyrion or Peter Dinklage, the actor who plays him, which I think out of all the actors and actresses, I think he's probably the one more inclined to turn it down.
Yeah, I think so also. I think you're right. I think if there's a well enough written script, there might be a willingness to come back.
Correct. That's how you really get it done, I think. And that's how you get people to sign on who perhaps wouldn't sign on. You have to tell them, you have to show them that this is going to be a well-written project, right? Because they have their experiences with the backlash from the last series they were in. And on top of it, now this new show of House of the Dragon it's successful right now, right? And they're doing a good job. Let's see how they finish it. But in this moment, they're doing a good job, and the bar is set pretty high. And I'm thinking that anybody that signs on is going to want to meet those standards.
Yeah,
I don't blame them.
Yep, I agree with you. So, I mean, again, a big pro would be we see Daenerys come back. In what form and how would that look like? Because, I mean, again, you have like Don Dondarrion with all those slashes across his body, like he looked different. And then you have Jon Snow, who came back. But at the same time, I haven't sat and thought about, were there any differences with him afterwards? Was there a change?
Yeah, well, I didn't think there was a change as far as, aside from, like, honestly, the scarring or anything like that. I didn't see any change in personality, in morals, or in abilities, right? He was still a great warrior. He was still very honorable. Whether I would have done certain things he did, probably not. But, he was still at least consistently the same character. Does that happen in the books? Well, we know that it doesn't, right? There's more magic in the books. In the books, we know that even Catelyn Stark comes back like for lack of a better term, some sort of zombie that has her throat still wide open, and she just roams the Riverlands, and she's known as Lady Stoneheart, I think.
Lady Stoneheart, which that might have to do with how fast you can heal somebody or, move forward. So it'll be interesting to see if they open up that gate for more magic. There could be more possibilities in how she comes back. But then, oh, go ahead. I'm
No,
sorry.
no, no. I was gonna say I kind of welcome it. I don't know if you
Yeah,
do,
I
but
agree.
it can't be. If we use the same characters, it just has to be careful. It could work. It just if you do it, if you turn the magic level all the way to 10, like in the books, it's probably not gonna be a good transition from one storyline to the other because it'll be super different. Like we know that in the books, John wargs into Ghost, and then so does Arya. Well, not into Ghost, but into well, she has wolf dreams.
Yeah, which is warging, but she
Yeah.
calls them that. But I agree with you. But there's not a crazy amount of magic to where, uh, to where it's like unfeasible for them to add it in, like, and kind of slowly introduce all
Mm-hmm.
of that. Because even then, I mean, we have certain things like Valerian steel has magical properties, and Melisandre has magic somehow, and then supposedly, for whatever reason, and we'll get into that a little later, magic is becoming more prevalent in Westeros.
Mm-hmm.
So if that's increasing, dragons are coming about, and like Melisandre has more magic now, the priest, all of these things are happening,
Mm-hmm.
and that could be a slow incline ramping us up to the next story, and then even going into like the three-eyed raven and stuff,
Mm-hmm.
he's been waiting there a long time.
Yeah.
So I mean, there's a lot to explore there. Like, I don't fully trust him in the books. He's not necessarily like a positive character.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't necessarily trust him leading Westeros, to be honest with you, independent of it being a bad decision that it was Bran.
Okay. Well, Bran is the three-eyed raven, but it almost seems like the three-eyed raven is its own thing, and then it uses somebody else's body to fully to just kind of use it as a vessel, but it might be its own entity, right? Would you say that?
I mean, it does seem
It's really
like
weird, hard to explain.
he's different, even when they're getting shown like into the sequence of the past where he gets to see his dad and stuff. He's more himself there, and he's walking, right?
Yes.
And then after that, then he completely changes. But we do see that he's not necessarily a trustworthy character. He lies to us right off the bat when he tells him, yes, you can transport, but that's not like, that's you can't interact with anybody. Don't interact with anybody. They won't hear you anyways. But then later on, we have remnants of like Eddard hears him when Bran calls out to him. Then at the same time, Theon hears something at the Godswood, and that's Bran trying to talk to him. So that's already one lie that he's telling Bran. Why does he lie? We don't really get to find out.
Mm-hmm. Well, it'd be super interesting if it turns out that the three-eyed raven is somehow fighting for power, just as bad as the Bad King, the Night King, and that's their constant struggle, right? He does it in a different way. The Night King has his strong points, right? He's obviously very powerful, brings people back from the dead to join his army, growing his numbers. Bran is more of a person that can kind of be everywhere at once, and then and we know, as you were just saying, that he can affect certain things. We see with Hodor how he this weird paradox that the older Hodor has this thing where he's holding the door, and Bran is somehow in the past with young Hodor, not him himself, but he's there, and as he's having those visions along with the three-eyed raven, they're trying to get away in real time, and that leads the old Hodor to kind of hold the door and go through this long agony and like painful death of holding the door, and then them clawing him and scratching him, and at the same time the young Hodor is having like this seizure, what then leads him to become how he is, right? Which is this weird paradox, but we know that he can affect the reality. And if that's true, then one can say that he kind of orchestrated all this bullshit to happen.
Exactly.
So he can sit on the
Yeah.
throne.
He manipulated everything in order to, and again, we don't really know if all the White Walkers are gone, because we know that this Night King, I mean, turned a ton of them into his army, and he had generals and all this stuff. So if he had generals, did he have any rivals farther down the line? Was there any other group? Are they all gone? So, I mean, in this case, what if there is that possibility that the three-eyed raven, I mean, because, okay, in the books, Euron Greyjoy also has dreams that he is trying to fly. The same thing, right? He flies, and there's a theory that that's the three-eyed raven was calling him also. So, and then if we think back too, there were supposed to be all of these bones down where the three-eyed raven was. And when Bran, in his dream, when he looks down, there's all of these like bones there. So that's most likely the people that didn't make it. So he's been trying to reel somebody in.
Oh, I see.
You know what I mean? For a long time.
Sense.
So, but that's not to say everybody's going to make it all the way out there.
Yeah.
Everything kind of fell in a way to where maybe, okay, this is the one. And then he took away his shackles, you know? And the whole thing was for the three-eyed raven to defeat the Night King, orchestrated this whole, you know, intrinsic plan.
It could be. I mean,
and now he's the ruler of Westeros. Like, it worked.
Yeah. And what's his real motive? Like, just to be the ruler, or does he have a bigger plan once he's the ruler? And that could be the potential conflict, right? So a lot of possibilities. I'm not even saying that's a good storyline, but it's a storyline that could be explored in this new sequel. One of the things I'm most excited about is now that we have a new show with the House of Dragon one, they can tie in House of Dragon with the Jon Snow show. One of the examples would be that, without spoiling too much for the people watching House of Dragon, if you haven't read the books, is that we don't know currently in Game of Thrones where the Targaryen swords are, right? We know that Aegon, the current king, it wields Blackfire, the sword, and Daemon has Dark Sister. Well, they're nowhere to be seen in the current show of Game of Thrones, but we do know that Dark Sister ended up north of the Wall with Bloodraven. And if you guys don't know who Bloodraven is, with Brandon Rivers, it's actually the three-eyed raven who summons or, calls upon Bran. And we don't know what happens to the sword. That's not written in the books, but we do know that he had him with it. We had the sword with him, and he ended up north of the Wall. Who's north of the Wall now? Jon. Who's a Targaryen? Jon. So that might be a cool little nod to the other series if he finds it. And most importantly, it can be a major, major weapon that could potentially be Lightbringer. Maybe.
Yeah, and I mean, even if we think about it, remember there was that scene where Jon found all that dragon glass, and then he found out the horn.
The horn, yeah.
And all that stuff. Like, we still don't know why it was out there. Who put it there?
Mm-hmm.
Where does dragon glass come from?
Yes.
Dragonstone. And how far is that from the wall?
I know.
You know what I mean? Like, all of those things are very open-ended things that, like, we slowly learn as the lore goes on that they're kind of tied to the Targaryens. And it seems almost like in this House of Dragon show, maybe keeping in mind the sequel, that they're setting it up to tie it in, right? Even putting in the prophecy on the cat's paw.
Dagger, yeah.
Dagger, like, that opens it up because now, I mean, Arya has it. Arya at some point, if there's a Jon Snow sequel, will probably meet up with Jon.
I mean, hopefully, right? I mean, I think it would be a very interesting story. Like, I don't know how they're gonna work it, but when it does, if it happens, it's gonna be very good for the viewer.
Well, they're both. I mean, think about it. They're both discovering certain undiscovered lands, right? At least for us as a viewer, places we haven't seen too much.
Mm-hmm.
So, I mean, as explorers bumping into explorers, I don't think it's that crazy, for them to bump into each other. But all of these things in House of the Dragon, all this talk of prophecy, and again, the prince that was promised, all of that Azor Ahai stuff kind of could potentially tie into this new sequel. They could be setting it up for that.
Mm-hmm.
Especially since there's so much unanswered on that prophecy. We don't really know if it was Jon, or if Daenerys has anything to do with it. Like,
yeah, if it was fulfilled, if it was either one of them, did it happen already? There's a lot of loose ends that can. With this series, what the Game of Thrones universe is getting is an opportunity to tie up all these loose ends, explain a lot of stuff. One of the things that I had the biggest problem with the Game of Thrones series is that from day one, episode 1, we see the walkers, and we see that they killed members of the. Well, actually, they had mutilated some of the free folk, and they did this time and time again, by the way, where they would get the body parts and put them in almost like a spiral type of symbol, and we saw it all through the series, but it was never explained. It was never explained.
Never.
And as a matter of fact, I was telling you the other day, I was like, you know what those symbols remind me of? It reminds me in a way of the Targaryen flag. If you look at the Targaryen flag has a 3-headed dragon along with 3 tails for each of those dragons. Obviously, each dragon represents Aegon, his dragon, and then one for each of his sisters to help them conquer the realm. But if you look at it, and I think if you change the direction, it almost seems like the same symbol that the Night King would leave along with the other walkers had. But
yeah, I mean, there's a lot of stuff that could, because there's a lot of theories, right? There's a lot of stuff going around, especially when House of the Dragon came out, where people were revisiting all the theories about who the Night King was, because we didn't get a response. We
still don't know.
I mean, people are speculating, hey, he was probably the first one, but he didn't really look like the first Night Walker, because we saw him come to fruition. Also, going back to the Blood Raven thing, possible theory, that could really make a perfect sense of conflict, because you have the Children of the Forest are part of the Three-Eyed Raven. They're allies with him, right?
Mm-hmm.
And then you have on the other side, like, all of the you have the White Walkers, but we don't really know, other than they did all this work to keep them out, but we don't really know. Like, I'm sorry, I'm getting drunk and I lost my train of thought.
It's okay. For me, the uncertainty of, are they really gone? It's gonna be interesting, because like you were saying, we see a scene in the show where they're making a walker. Everybody assumes it's the Night King. It doesn't have to be.
And why are they trying to fight? Who are they trying to fight? Because if they're trying to get to Blood Raven, that might not necessarily be a bad thing. Like, where do we have things to go off of? You know what I mean? So there's also theories that, it just going back, there's also theories that Daemon could be the Night King.
That'd be interesting.
Because things happen. I'm going to give a spoiler. Cover your ears, pause it, fast forward 10 seconds. But so Daemon, we don't really know where he ends up at the end.
Mm-hmm.
We don't really know. So that leaves it up to ambiguity to what happened to him. I mean, if he is combating some kind of force that we don't really know about, like that could also make sense.
Mm-hmm.
And maybe he is still fighting to get that Targaryen on the throne, or because Blood Raven's trying to usurp the throne and end him, and then that's their purpose.
Who knows? That could be one way of spinning it, right? Or he could just be some. Once again, we don't know. We're just this is all theories. But if he turns out to be the Night King, it could be some sort of higher power that summons him or turns him into the Night King, and he becomes a new thing with a new purpose. Maybe he's no longer. He doesn't see himself as a Targaryen. He's this new thing, and I think if they did that, and he becomes the Night King and really is Daemon Targaryen, then I don't think he's worried about any more Targaryens or regaining power because he's a Targaryen. Only I think he would just want the power for the sake of having it.
I guess so. But yeah, going to the Azor Ahai prophecy again. That's another question we don't really have answered. Who the Night King was. That could be explored in the Snow series. But the Azor Ahai prophecy, we don't. So it said that we were going to get a prince that was born from salt, smoke, and.
For those of you that don't know who Azor Ahai is is a warrior that drove away the darkness thousands of years ago, and it's prophesied that he will be returning, and he will drive away the long night once more, and he would wield a sword called Lightbringer. I don't think we saw that.
No, and we're gonna give a more in-depth
analysis
on the Azor Ahai prophecy. So if you're curious about that, stay tuned. That's coming soon. But yeah, there was all these stipulations. Basically, he was the next Messiah that would bring upon a new age of heroes, right? So there was all these stipulations, and people speculated that he could be a Targaryen or again, and now we hear in this House of the Dragon prequel that it's a Targaryen, and that secret and that prophecy, which we didn't know before, was carried down by each Targaryen that had the throne. So there's certain indications that somebody was going to be the prince that was promised. He was going to bear the sword Lightbringer, which was supposed to be a sword that lit on fire. Hence, Melisandre and Stannis putting wildfire on their sword to make it seem like it. But we don't really know. We don't really have an answer because a Targaryen doesn't end up on the throne on season 8. We don't really see that Lightbringer sword come forth.
And on top of it, let's not forget that Drogon burnt the Iron Throne.
Yeah.
He burnt it down once Daenerys was dead. He burns down the Iron Throne, and I think in a poetic way, he realizes that it was her obsession over sitting on that damn throne that really got her killed and turned her into the Mad Queen, and led to her death. And he very poetically burns it down, grabs her body, and then flies off. But I think that's a very good thing for us Game of Thrones fans with this upcoming show.
And I think it's a good indication that the fact that Drogon burns the Iron Throne, leaves, and he could have easily, what he did to the Iron Throne, done that to Jon. He let him live.
Yes.
And I think that's a good indication. In the books, they speak about how the dragons have and the writers have connections. So oftentimes they'll act if the dragon is like mean or or is not a good character, then they kind of act in that way, right? So that's why there's that whole with Aemon. There's that whole speculation, like, was he just trying to play with him, or was that really his inner desire to like really kill him after all? If you're fucking with them and with the dragon, you probably want to kill him anyways. You know what I mean? I know that one's a little more ambiguous, but
I think part of him wanted to kill Luke, but not in that moment because he didn't have the okay to do it. And he understands that now it was him who started this war. Right now, it doesn't have to be a war, right? If all the lords of Westeros pick one side over the other, there probably won't be a war. But right now, what they were doing is inquiring to see who would join their side. And I mean, technically, that's not war.
But what I'm trying to get at is that the dragons are usually tied in with the emotions of the rider, right?
I see.
So in this case, the fact that Drogon left Jon alone means that possibly in the future, this gives a window for them to potentially be on the same side.
Maybe.
Or maybe she's pregnant.
I thought she was pregnant.
Well, they kind of seemed to allude to that, and then there you go, prince that was promised.
Yeah. See, that was my theory all along before. It was like she kept on pushing. I was like, well, I can never have kids. Who said that? Yeah. And then she says who, and it's just this.
And more magic with the Maggie and all that stuff.
But who knows? Who knows what's gonna happen? But anyways, we're on the next episode. We're definitely gonna dive deeper into the Azor Ahai prophecy.
Yes.
And perhaps some of the other theories that are out there. So
yeah, there's other theories on what it could be on and where we could go towards moving forward. But next episode, keep an eye out, keep an ear out.
Yeah.
We'll be discussing and going into depth. What is the Azor Ahai prophecy? Who is the prince that was promised? Could we see that moving forward? And has that prophecy been fulfilled on?
Yeah,
the
was
Game
it
of
Jon
Thrones?
already, or was it Daenerys in a way already?
Or is that prophecy? Was that prophecy? I mean, completely overthrown by the death of Daenerys. That could also be a possibility.
Yeah,
if she did die,
Yeah, who knows? But anyways. That does it for today's show. Please don't forget to like and subscribe. And if you guys have any comments, perhaps you guys have your own theories and predictions, please leave them down below. Until next time,
stay drinking.